So I want to set the stage for kind of the big picture, the set of skills that we're going to be talking about all year. And one of the things that I think is worthwhile for you to think about and understand is that everything that we're doing in this class, everything to the best of my ability, is something that I actually think is going to be useful for you at some point. Not necessarily the specifics, right? Like today, we're going to look at lichen data that you guys collected from sticks, where you're measuring lichen abundance and like trying to figure out something about air pollution. That is not something that you probably will do down the road. But having a set of numbers that you need to somehow evaluate, interpret, you almost certainly will do that at some point. And I can't predict exactly what it's going to look like for you, but for many of you, it might be financial, if nothing else. At some point, you might be looking at making a purchase, like a relatively large purchase, like a computer or a car or a house. And when you do that, you're going to have to sit down and look at things like, well, how much income do I have, and where does my money go every month, and what do I anticipate my income being down the road? And all of a sudden, you're doing a bunch of stuff with numbers. And using a spreadsheet and making these kinds of calculations is quite likely going to be how you do stuff like that. Another skill that you're going to be working on today is kind of reporting something. You're gonna explain what you did on the Lichen project. We're going to do another lab report. And the thing that's interesting about that is same deal, right? Like, you may not be scientists, you may never write a lab report, but everyone in here, with no exception, at some point is either gonna need to report to somebody what you did, or even like more, this skill becomes even more useful if you're gonna need to tell somebody else what to do. You may be a supervisor at a job, and there may be a day where you're like, oh crap, I'm not gonna be here tomorrow because I'm going to a meeting. I need to tell my team how they need to approach this project today. And at that point, all of a sudden, you have to be able to explain it to them. And you can't use AI, right? Like you can't go to ChatGPT and say, how do I explain to my team how to get a report out? Like, it's gonna give you, what ChatGPT stuff, it's gonna be like, writing reports is one of the most important things you can do in your job. And it's gonna like spew out a bunch of stuff that's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything, it's not specific, it won't be helpful. You need to be able to tell your team, look, here's what the report was on. I want you to target the graphs that show the growth in productivity over the first quarter. And you need to be figuring out who in marketing we need to communicate with so that we can get this report out by Friday. And you need to be doing this, and you need to be doing that, and ChatGPT isn't gonna do it for you. So the general skills that we're using here are skills that you can take and use in your life. So one of the things that we're working on, and you do not need to write this down, this is like, I'm gonna leave this up here so you can think about it, but what you're doing is you're practicing useful skills. And for example, reporting information or analyzing data. Those are things that you will, and I can't predict exactly what it's going to look like, but those are super useful skills. So that's one thing to think about. The second thing that we're going to do, and this is kind of at a different level, we have done some of this stuff already. You've now written 2 of these final reports. You did one for the plant project, you did one for the aquatic macroinvertebrate study. And both times I kind of walked you through it, but I sort of helped you less the second time. And this time, for much of the stuff that we do, I'm not gonna help you. What I will do is keep track of the time for you. So I will make sure that we stay on track for everybody to get everything done today, but I'm not gonna give everybody instructions because there's some resources that are already there that you can use. So one of the things that that I want to help you all get better at is using resources to solve problems on your own. It's really helpful when there's somebody there. It's really helpful when I could say, Katie, what did I do with my coffee? Right? Because I don't remember. But the thing is, like, first of all, Katie's not always gonna be here. And second of all, it's not Katie's job to know where my coffee is. So at some point, I need to have the skill of being like, I know what I did with my coffee. I brought it on my, didn't bring it on my bike. It must be on my, that's not on my desk. Like, what in the world could I possibly have done with my coffee? How do I figure that out? Like, that's a problem that nobody here can help me with, right? And that is something that's a really useful thing. So we have for the introduction, the methods, the data analysis, by which I mean the summary data table and the graph, and for part of the discussion, the answer to our question and the idea of thinking about possible, oops, I don't need quotation marks around that, possible explanation. You guys all have a ton of resources here. You have your previous work. We have presentations on many of these things in the modules. There are videos that I posted of all of these things. All of that stuff is available in the modules. And I do not expect everybody here to remember everything, nor do I expect everybody to be able to go to these resources and completely figure it out on your own. My ask is going to be that you start with the resources. So when I give you, in just a few minutes, time to work on the introduction, some of you are going to ask questions like, wait, what was our question again? Or what else do I put in the introduction besides the question? Before you ask that, I want you to go to modules and look at a couple of things. One is, if you scroll down to the videos section, you'll see things like biology lab reports. So there is me talking about the introduction, the methods, the results, the discussion. And if you look at today's module, which is the Lichen Project Final Report, there's a link to today's assignment. And in that link is the question. So it's right here. And I'm not gonna leave that up because you can all find it yourself. But what I want is for you to try to use those resources to get this stuff taken care of on your own first. And that, again, is an incredibly useful skill. Because what you're gonna find is, time and time again, once you leave this academic institution, you're gonna have to figure stuff out on your own. That's my job, to prepare you for that. And I have every reason to believe that you're gonna be awesome at it. I also have every reason to believe that in the past, you've been able to get other people to do this stuff for you by saying, how do we do this again? What do I do here? And so my response, as you guys ask those questions, is gonna be, look, did you watch the video? Show me where you found the video. Let's find the video together. Because I'm not always gonna be around to help you do all this stuff. Okay, and then there is one skill that we've only done once, and that is the skill of a statistical evaluation. So with a t-test, you have to carry it out, you have to type some stuff in, and you have to evaluate the t-test, and that we've only done once. There's some resources on that, but when we get to this point, I'm going to show you again, because this is something we haven't had a chance to do. And then the last thing is we're going to learn something new, and this is something we're going to keep going on Monday. So today what we're going to do is we're going to just wrap up this whole report, get the whole thing turned in, and we're going to be done with the lichen study, but we're not done with lichens because on Monday, we're gonna do one last thing, which is to look a little bit more deeply at something new, which is the idea of a bioindicator. And we talked about that just a tiny bit on Wednesday. I mentioned that lichens are a bioindicator for air pollution because some lichens are super sensitive to pollutants in the air. But I didn't tell you how we can use this. We're gonna be using it today, so I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more about it today. And then on Monday, we're gonna come back and dive into it a little bit more because there is something that's really cool about what we're gonna be doing here. And then, I'm not gonna write it down, but we're gonna do some other stuff. And some of the other stuff that we do is even like bigger and broader than all of these things. Because one of the things that we're gonna talk about is there is, first of all, there's data that we can trust and data analyses that we can trust. And then there's data that may be accurate, but doesn't mean what we think it does. And we need to be able to consider all of that stuff because people are gonna be trying to prove things to you with numbers all your life. Like politicians, for example, they're gonna try to convince you that they should get elected because of this number and that number and this number. And for the most part, they don't actually know what they're talking about. They believe what they're talking about, so good for them, but they're wrong about much of what they say because they don't know what I want you all to know, which is that data is tricky. Data is super tricky, and analyzing data is super tricky. And there's a psychology piece that we're gonna look at as well. And that's where, David, your comment earlier comes in, because I wanna talk about that, because this is something that I think is gonna affect all of you. It already does. It's gonna continue to affect all of you throughout your life. And I really wanna make sure that you hear at least once in your life something that I think is really important when it comes to the psychology of certain numbers. All right, so I am going to pause the video.